Please don't leave me. I have to go with you.
I was kneeling in the execution square with a blade at my throat when I saw him, Alpha King Rowan Thorn, standing at the back of the crowd like death itself, had taken mortal form to watch me die. I should have been focused on the executioner. Should have been praying to the moon goddess or thinking about my parents. Should have been accepting that in 30 seconds, my head would roll across blood-stained stones and Martin Elliot would finally have his victory. Instead, I was looking at the Alpha King and thinking, he's my only chance. It was insane. Everyone knew Rowan Thorn didn't save condemned prisoners, didn't intervene in territorial executions, didn't show mercy to traitors' daughters, even when the treason charges were fabricated lies designed to justify territorial theft. But I'd spent 6 months in Martin's dungeons, and I'd learned something. Sometimes the most dangerous option is the only option. Sometimes you have to throw yourself at the feet of a man more terrifying than death and pray he's interested enough to keep you breathing. So when Rowan invoked Crown authority and demanded a private audience, when the guards dragged me from the platform into a stone chamber where the Alpha King waited, I didn't beg for mercy, didn't claim innocence, didn't waste breath on pleas he'd heard 1,000 times. I dropped to my knees at his feet, looked up at the most feared wolf in existence, and said 5 words I knew would either save me or destroy me faster than Martin's blade ever could. Don't leave me here. Please. Not save me. Not I'm innocent. Just don't leave me here. Because I knew better than to ask for rescue. I was asking for a transfer of custody. Asking to trade Martin's chains for Rowan's. Asking to survive another day, even if that survival looked like different captivity. Rowan studied me with eyes that reflected absolute authority and something else, calculation. He was weighing options, assessing value, deciding if one condemned prisoner was worth the political complications of challenging Martin's execution. "What are you offering?" he asked, his voice carrying the kind of power that made other alphas submit instinctively. "Information," I said, because it was the only currency I had. Insight into how Martin operates. Knowledge of Crimson Veil that he desperately wants. And I met his eyes. "Whatever else you need. I'll be whatever you need me to be if it means surviving long enough to make Martin pay for murdering my parents." "You're offering yourself as a weapon," Rowan said. "Not asking to be saved. Asking to be used." Yes. I didn't lie. Didn't pretend this was about rescue or justice or anything noble. It was about revenge, and I'd become anything, endure anything to get it. Rowan smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Good. I can work with that." He claimed me through Crown authority, removed me from Martin's custody, saved me from execution. But he didn't save me from suffering. He just changed what the suffering would look like. This is the story of what I became when I begged the Alpha King not to leave me to die. This is the story of the price I paid for revenge. This is the story of how sometimes survival is more brutal than the death you avoided. And this is the story of how I learned that the most dangerous words you can ever speak are, "I'll be whatever you need me to be." Because men like Rowan Thorn, they take you at your word. And what they need is usually worse than what you feared. She just traded execution for something potentially worse, and she doesn't even know what yet. If you want to see what happens when you beg the most feared Alpha King alive to claim you, hit subscribe right now. Because this story has infiltration, fake submission that requires real suffering, a revenge plot 10 years in the making, and an Alpha King who will use absolutely anyone to get what he wants. This is going to be dark. This is going to be intense. You don't want to miss a single chapter of this story. Subscribe and let's watch survival become a strategy. Let me tell you what it's like to be the last surviving member of a murdered pack. You wake up every morning, and for exactly 3 seconds, you forget. Forget that your parents are dead. Forget that your territory was stolen. Forget that everything you knew was systematically dismantled by a man who smiled while fabricating evidence of treason. Then you remember. And those 3 seconds of peace become 23 hours and 57 minutes of rage. I'm Naomi Kalos, former heir to Crimson Vale, current prisoner of Alpha Martin Elliott, and, as of this morning, property of the Alpha King through Crown authority that I invoked by begging him not to leave me in Martin's custody. 6 months ago, I had a family, had a pack, had a future that involved diplomatic training, and maybe eventually leading Crimson Vale alongside a mate I'd choose myself. My parents were good leaders, fair, just focused on healing rather than warfare. Crimson Vale was neutral territory, the place packs came when they needed mediation, medical treatment, or just somewhere safe to exist without constantly fighting for dominance. We were valuable because we were peaceful. And that's exactly why Martin destroyed us. He needed our territory for strategic positioning, needed our healing springs for his wounded warriors, needed our diplomatic neutrality eliminated so he could expand Iron Ridge without anyone intervening. So he fabricated evidence, documents showing my parents smuggling weapons to rebels, providing sanctuary to rogues plotting against the crown, actively working to undermine pack stability. It was all lies. Perfect, unverifiable lies supported by witnesses Martin had bribed and documents Martin had forged. But it looked real enough that the other alphas believed it. That the council accepted his accusations. That my parents were executed for treason before I could even mount a defense. I was 24. I was trained in healing, not warfare. I was educated in diplomacy, not combat. And I was completely, utterly powerless to stop Martin from taking everything. He offered me a choice after my parents died. Marry his son Garrett and legitimize his claim to Crimson Vale through my bloodline, or be executed as a traitor's daughter alongside my parents.
Y chose exécution.
Every single day, for 6 months, I chose execution. Because marrying Garrett meant betraying my parents' memory, meant pretending their murder was justified, meant helping Martin consolidate the power he'd stolen through fabrication and lies. So Martin kept me in his dungeons and tried to break me. Tried beatings. Tried starvation. Tried isolation. Tried every psychological manipulation he knew to make me submit, to make me accept the marriage, to make me useful to him. I refused. Not because I'm particularly brave. Not because I'm stronger than fear. But because dying with dignity was preferable to living as Martin's puppet. Then came the execution date. Spring equinox. Public square. Maximum audience. Martin wanted every pack to witness justice being served, and wanted my death to be an example of what happens when you resist him. I was ready. Had accepted it. Had made peace with dying rather than submitting. Then Rowan Thorne showed up. The Alpha King doesn't usually attend territorial executions. They're beneath his notice. Too local. Too minor to warrant royal attention. But something brought him to Iron Ridge that day. Something made him stand at the back of that crowd and watch as I was dragged onto the execution platform. And when the blade was at my throat, when 30 seconds remained before Martin's victory, Rowan invoked Crown authority and demanded a private audience. I had maybe 5 minutes to convince the most powerful wolf alive not to send me back to execution. 5 minutes to offer something valuable enough to make him intervene in territorial politics for one condemned prisoner. So I didn't waste time on pleas. Didn't beg for mercy.
Didn't ask to be saved.
I asked to be claimed. Don't leave me here, I said, kneeling at his feet. Take me with you. Use me however you want. I'll be whatever weapon you need against Martin if it means surviving long enough to make him pay. And Rowan, Moon Goddess, helped me, said yes. He claimed me through Crown authority, removed me from Martin's custody, saved me from execution. But he didn't save me. He weaponized me. Privately, in that stone chamber while Martin raged outside, Rowan explained the real bargain. I would infiltrate Martin's inner circle by pretending to finally break. I would accept marriage to Garrett. I would legitimize Martin's claim to Crimson Vale. But while playing submissive victim, I would feed Martin false information that Rowan provided, lies designed to make him believe he had support for open rebellion against the crown. The goal: make Martin confident enough to attempt a coup. And when he did, destroy him publicly with witnesses and evidence, the same way he destroyed Rowan's father a decade ago. Your parents weren't Martin's first victims, Rowan told me, his voice carrying cold fury I recognized because I felt it too. 10 years ago, he led the conspiracy that had my father declared mentally unfit and executed. He walked away clean, used his reward territory to build Iron Ridge, and has been systematically expanding ever since. I've been hunting evidence against him for a decade. You're going to help me finish it. Why should I trust you?
I asked.
Why should I believe you'll actually let me survive once I've served your purpose? You shouldn't trust me, Rowan said. You should recognize that I'm offering you the only path to revenge that exists. You can die today with dignity, but no justice. Or you can endure months of strategic suffering, help me trap Martin and watch him fall. Your choice. It wasn't a choice. Not really. Because I wanted Martin to pay more than I wanted easy death. So I agreed. Agreed to infiltrate. Agreed to fake submission. Agreed to marry Garrett Elliott and endure whatever abuse that entailed. Agreed to become a weapon in Rowan's hands, used to destroy the man who'd murdered my parents. I just didn't understand then how much it would cost. How deeply strategic suffering would damage me. How hard it would be to separate performing victimhood from becoming it. That's what I'm going to tell you about. The 6 months I spent as Rowan's weapon. The lies I sold so perfectly that even I started believing them. The abuse I endured to maintain cover. The revenge I earned through precision, sacrifice, and strategic self-destruction. This is the story of what happens when you beg an alpha king not to leave you to die. This is the story of the price you pay when you offer yourself as a weapon. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes survival is more brutal than the death you escaped. Welcome to my strategic suffering. Welcome to my precision revenge. Welcome to the months I spent becoming someone I barely recognized because it was the only way to make Martin pay. And pray you never have to choose between dignity in death and degradation in survival. Because once you make that choice, there's no going back to who you were before. I had 30 seconds to live when I first saw Alpha King Rowan Thorne standing at the back of the execution crowd. My knees were pressed against blood-stained stone, my wrists bound with silver-lace chains that burned with every heartbeat, the executioner's blade already raised above my head. Around me, Iron Ridge Pack members cheered like they were watching entertainment instead of state-sanctioned murder. Martin Elliott stood on the platform beside me, his alpha authority radiating satisfaction. He'd won. Destroyed my pack, murdered my parents, stolen my territory, and now, finally, was getting rid of the last obstacle to his complete victory.
Me.
Naomi Kalos. Former heir to Crimson Vale. Current condemned traitor. Soon-to-be corpse. Any final words? Martin asked, his voice carrying false mercy he knew I wouldn't accept. I should have prayed to the moon goddess. Should have thought about my parents waiting for me in whatever came after. Should have faced death with dignity and grace. Instead, I was staring at the Alpha King and thinking, he's my only chance. It was insane. Everyone knew Rowan Thorne didn't save condemned prisoners. Didn't intervene in territorial executions. Didn't show mercy to anyone, let alone traitors' daughters whose guilt had been witnessed by 5 territories. But I'd spent 6 months in Martin's dungeons learning that sometimes the most dangerous option is the only option. Sometimes you have to throw yourself at the feet of someone more terrifying than death and pray they're interested enough to keep you breathing. I have nothing to say, I told Martin, my voice steadier than I felt. You've already taken everything that matters. Might as well take my life too. Martin smiled, that practiced politician smile that had fooled so many for so long. Such unnecessary defiance. You could have had comfort, Naomi, safety, status as my daughter-in-law if you'd just been reasonable. Instead, you chose this.
I chose dignity over complicity. I corrected.
There's a difference. Dignity doesn't survive death, Martin said, gesturing to the executioner. But defiance makes an excellent public example. Proceed. The blade descended, and I closed my eyes, accepting what came next. Hold. The word cracked like thunder across the square, carrying so much alpha command that even the executioner froze mid-swing. I opened my eyes to see Rowan Thorne moving through the crowd, pack members instinctively parting for him like he was weather instead of wolf. He was taller than I'd expected, broader, with dark hair and eyes that reflected power so absolute it felt like gravity itself had taken mortal form. Alpha King, Martin said, and I heard the edge in his voice, surprise mixed with concern. This is territorial justice. Internal pack matter. Your presence honors us. But nothing, Rowan interrupted, his gaze fixed on me with unsettling intensity. I invoke Crown authority. This execution is delayed until I've conducted private audience with the condemned. Remove her from the platform. Martin's face went carefully neutral. Your Majesty, the sentence has been witnessed by 5 territories. The evidence of treason is something I'll review myself, Rowan said coldly. Unless you're suggesting an Alpha King doesn't have authority to question territorial justice? Because I'd be very interested in hearing that argument. Silence fell over the square. No one questioned Rowan's authority.
Not openly.
Not unless they wanted to face him in combat, which everyone knew was suicide. Of course not, Your Majesty, Martin said, his voice carrying forced respect. We live to serve the crown. The prisoner is yours to examine. Guards hauled me to my feet, the chains burning fresh pain into my already raw wrists. I stumbled, caught myself, refused to show weakness even though my legs barely supported me after kneeling on stone. Rowan turned without another word, and the guards dragged me after him, away from the execution platform, away from the cheering crowd, into a stone chamber that smelled like old blood and older fear.
The door closed.
The guards remained outside, and I was alone with the most feared wolf in existence, with maybe 5 minutes to convince him not to send me back to execution. Kneel, Rowan commanded, and I dropped immediately, not from submission but from strategic recognition that fighting an Alpha King was pointless. He circled me slowly, studying me like I was a puzzle he was considering whether to solve or discard. Naomi Kalos, last heir of Crimson Vale, condemned for treason against the crown through providing sanctuary to rebels. Do you deny the charges? Yes, I said, because lying to an Alpha King seemed less suicidal than admitting to fabricated crimes. My parents were framed. The evidence Martin presented was forged. We never harbored rebels, never smuggled weapons, never did anything except exist in territory Martin wanted. And you expect me to believe that? To override 5 territories worth of witnesses? No, I said honestly. I expect you to recognize fabricated evidence when you see it. Expect you to notice how conveniently my parents' treason gave Martin exactly the territory he needed for strategic expansion. Expect you to question why a pack known for diplomatic neutrality would suddenly start harboring rebels. Rowan stopped circling, positioned himself directly in front of me. Even if I believed you, which I neither confirm nor deny, what exactly do you expect me to do? Pardon you publicly? Challenge Martin's authority in front of 5 territories? Risk political chaos over 1 condemned prisoner? No, I said again. I don't expect you to pardon me. Don't expect you to challenge Martin. Don't expect rescue. Then what do you expect? I took a breath, made the gamble that would either save me or just kill me faster. I expect you to claim me. Invoke Crown authority to transfer custody. Remove me from Martin's execution order through territorial override. I don't need pardoning. I just need to not be in Martin's custody when that blade falls. Rowan's expression didn't change. You're asking to be claimed by the crown, made property of the Alpha King, transferred from Martin's authority to mine. Yes. That's not a rescue. That's just different captivity. I know, I said. But different captivity means I survive another day. Survive long enough to maybe get revenge on the man who murdered my parents. I'll take survival in your dungeons over death in Martin Square. What makes you think my dungeons are preferable? Because you're not the one who killed my parents, I said bluntly. Because being claimed by you means Martin loses his prize. Because I met his eyes despite every instinct screaming to submit. Because I'm betting you have reasons of your own for hating Martin. And I'm offering to be whatever weapon you need against him if it means surviving long enough to watch him fall. Silence stretched between us. Rowan studied me with those dark, calculating eyes, and I felt like every lie I'd ever told, every secret I'd ever kept, was being catalogued and assessed. You're not asking to be saved, he said finally. You're volunteering to be used.
Yes.
Because I want revenge more than I want safety. Want Martin to pay more than I want easy death. And I'm guessing I took another risk. I'm guessing you want something from Martin too. Something that requires leverage you don't currently have. Something that requires someone on the inside who has reason to hate him as much as you do. Rowan smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. You're very perceptive for someone about to die. Fear clarifies thinking, I said. So does 6 months in dungeons. So does watching fabricated evidence destroy everything you love. I've had a lot of time to think, Your Majesty, to notice patterns, to recognize that Martin's rise to power has been very convenient, very strategic, very suspiciously clean for someone engaging in territorial theft through conspiracy. And I'm betting you've noticed too. Betting you've been investigating. Betting you need evidence that Martin's been careful not to leave. I leaned forward, chains burning, desperation making me bold. I can get that evidence. Can infiltrate his inner circle. Can feed you information he'd never give freely. But only if I'm alive. Only if you claim me. Only if you take me with you right now and tell Martin I'm crown property. Rowan knelt so we were eye level, his presence overwhelming at this proximity. What you're describing isn't rescue. It's strategic suffering. It's volunteering to endure months of abuse, manipulation, probable torture as you try to maintain cover. It's choosing prolonged hell over quick death. Are you actually prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes to make Martin pay, I said. My parents are dead. My pack is destroyed. My territory is stolen. I have nothing left except rage and the desperate need to make sure Martin doesn't get away clean. So yes, Your Majesty, I'm prepared for strategic suffering if it means eventual revenge. Even if that suffering breaks you? Even if infiltrating Martin's circle damages you permanently? Even if you survive but end up so traumatized by what you endured that revenge feels meaningless? Even then, I confirmed. Because dignity in death doesn't bring justice. But surviving long enough to gather evidence? That might. Rowan stood, offering his hand. I took it, let him pull me to my feet, let him study me with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. I'm going to tell you something, he said quietly. And you're going to decide whether you still want this bargain. 10 years ago, Martin Elliott was my father's most trusted advisor. When my father tried to reform pack law, to limit alpha authority, to protect vulnerable pack members, Martin led the conspiracy that had him declared mentally unfit and executed. He framed my father as insane, dangerous, a threat to kingdom stability. And everyone believed him. Even me, for a time. My breath caught. Martin killed your father? Martin orchestrated my father's murder and walked away clean. Used his reward territory to establish Iron Ridge. has been systematically expanding ever since through the same tactics he used on your family: fabricated evidence, strategic accusations, convenient treason that justifies territorial theft. Rowan's voice carried cold fury I recognized because I felt it too. I've been hunting for proof for 10 years, searching for evidence that would expose his pattern of conspiracy. You're going to help me find it?
How?
I asked. By doing exactly what you offered. I'll claim you through Crown authority, remove you from Martin's execution order. But then, his expression hardened. Then I'm going to make you look broken. Abuse you publicly just enough that when I return you to Martin looking defeated, he believes you've finally submitted. You'll accept marriage to his son Garrett. You'll legitimize his claim to Crimson Vale. You'll become exactly the tool he wanted you to be. Except I'll actually be your tool, I said, understanding. Feeding you information, gathering evidence, helping you build the case that destroys him. Exactly. But Naomi, Rowan's hand moved to my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. This will cost you. Cost more than you can imagine right now. You'll endure real abuse to sell the lie. Real suffering to maintain cover. Real trauma that doesn't stop being real just because it serves a purpose. Are you actually willing to pay that price? I thought about my parents, about Crimson Vale, about Martin's smile as he'd ordered my execution, about 6 months of choosing death over submission, and how neither option had brought justice. Yes, I said. I'll pay whatever price revenge costs. My voice broke slightly. Just don't leave me here. Don't send me back to that platform. Don't let Martin win. Rowan nodded once, decisively. Then you're mine. Crown property. My weapon to use as I see fit. And Martin is about to learn that sometimes the people he destroys come back to destroy him in turn. He moved to the door, opened it.
Guards.
Inform Alpha Martin that I'm claiming this prisoner through Crown authority. She's to be transferred to royal custody immediately. Anyone who objects can challenge me personally. Through the open door, I heard Martin's voice, controlled fury barely contained. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. The prisoner was sentenced by 5 territories and overruled by 1 Alpha King. Rowan interrupted coldly. Do you have a problem with that, Martin? Because I'm very interested in hearing an Alpha question Crown authority. It would make excellent precedent for future investigations. The threat hung in the air. Martin knew he couldn't challenge Rowan without facing him in combat. Knew that questioning Crown authority would make him look like a potential rebel. Knew he'd been outmaneuvered but couldn't understand how or why. Of course not, Your Majesty, Martin said, his voice acid with forced respect. The prisoner is yours. Though I question the wisdom of claiming a traitor. Question quietly, Rowan suggested. And away from my hearing. Guards, remove her chains. She's no longer your prisoner. The guards obeyed, removing the silver-laced bonds that had been burning my wrists for hours. I stumbled, caught myself, refused to show weakness even though relief made me dizzy. Rowan gripped my arm, not gently but not cruelly either.
Come.
We have months of planning ahead. And Martin, he turned back to the Alpha who'd tried to kill me. Thank you for the gift. She's going to be very useful. Martin's face was stone, but his eyes promised violence. He'd been denied his victory, his prize, his final piece of consolidating power over Crimson Vale. And he had no idea I was about to become the weapon that destroyed him. We left Iron Ridge, left the execution square, left Martin seething with impotent fury. And as Rowan's car drove away from the only territory I'd known for 6 months, I touched my unmarked wrists and tried not to think about what I'd just agreed to. Strategic suffering, prolonged abuse, months of pretending to be broken while gathering evidence. I'd traded quick death for slow destruction, traded dignity for revenge, traded one form of captivity for another. But at least I was alive. At least I had a purpose. At least Martin wouldn't win easily. Don't look so relieved, Rowan said beside me. What comes next is going to make you wish I'd left you on that platform. Make you question whether revenge is worth what it costs. Make you wonder if dying with dignity was actually the better choice. I know, I said. But at least I get to choose my suffering instead of having it inflicted without purpose. That has to count for something. We'll see, Rowan said. In 6 months, when you're married to Garrett Elliott and living the nightmare you just volunteered for, we'll see if you still think choice makes trauma acceptable. I didn't answer. Because he was right, I had no idea what I'd just signed up for. No concept of how badly strategic suffering would damage me. No understanding that volunteering for hell didn't make it less hellish. But I was alive. And alive meant I had a chance at revenge. For now, that was enough. Engagement questions. Would you trade quick death for prolonged suffering if it meant getting revenge? Can Rowan actually be trusted? Rowan's estate was nothing like Martin's dungeons. Where Martin kept prisoners in stone cells that smelled like blood and fear, Rowan housed me in guest quarters that were larger than my entire childhood bedroom. Soft bed. Private bathroom. Windows that actually opened. It was a cage, yes, but a gilded cage that made the past 6 months feel even more brutal by comparison. This is temporary, Rowan said, showing me the rooms. You'll stay here for 3 weeks while we prepare the next phase. Learn the intelligence I need you to feed Martin. Practice looking broken enough to be believable. And he stopped at the door. And recover from 6 months of actual suffering so you have strength for 6 months of strategic suffering. 3 weeks, I repeated. Then what? Then I return you to Martin, looking defeated. You accept marriage to Garrett. You begin gathering evidence. Rowan's expression was unreadable. But first, we make the lie believable. Tomorrow, you start training with Lydia, my intelligence coordinator. She'll teach you how to lie convincingly, how to maintain cover under interrogation, how to feed false information that looks real. It's going to be brutal. More brutal than execution? I asked dryly. Different brutal. Execution ends your suffering. This prolongs it indefinitely. Rowan moved to leave, then paused. Naomi, you can still change your mind. I can claim you met an accident while in my custody. Give you clean death instead of dirty revenge. No one would question it. No, I said immediately. I didn't survive execution just to accept death now.
I'm committed.
Whatever it takes. Remember you said that, Rowan murmured, when you're 6 months into this and wishing I'd killed you cleanly. After he left, I stood in those beautiful rooms and tried to process everything. I'd been condemned to death this morning. Had thrown myself at an Alpha King's feet. Had volunteered to become a weapon. Had been claimed, transferred, saved. Except I hadn't been saved. I'd been recruited. Transformed from condemned prisoner to strategic asset. From victim into infiltrator. I should have felt grateful. Felt relieved. Felt something other than hollow acceptance that I just traded one nightmare for another. Instead, I felt tired. Bone deep exhausted in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. Because I understood now what I'd really agreed to, months of pretending to be broken, of enduring abuse for strategic purpose, of becoming someone I'd hate in order to destroy someone I hated more. A knock interrupted my spiral. Naomi?
I'm Lydia.
May I enter? I opened the door to find a woman, maybe 40 years old, stern-faced and competent-looking, holding a stack of documents. I'm the Alpha King's intelligence coordinator. Over the next 3 weeks, I'll be training you for infiltration. Are you ready to begin?
Now.
I asked, surprised. It's barely past noon. I thought. You thought you'd get time to recover? To process? To adjust? Lydia's smile was sympathetic but firm. This is recovery, Naomi. Learning how to weaponize your suffering is the only healing you're going to get before we send you back to Martin. So yes, we start now.
Seat.
I sat, and Lydia spread documents across the table. These are profiles of everyone in Martin's inner circle. His son Garrett. his beta Cole, his advisors. You'll need to know them intimately, their habits, their weaknesses, their patterns. Because you're going to convince them all that you're exactly what they think you are. Broken Omega finally accepting her place. And how do I do that? I asked. By understanding what broken looks like, what submission sounds like, what trauma does to body language, speech patterns, decision-making. Lydia pulled out more papers. You're going to study trauma responses. Learn to mimic them convincingly. Practice being defeated without actually being defeated. It's acting, Naomi. Method acting where the role is victim and the audience will kill you if they detect performance. My stomach clenched. You're teaching me to pretend to be traumatized? I'm teaching you to perform trauma convincingly enough to fool people who've been breaking omegas for decades. Yes. Lydia's voice wasn't apologetic. It's disturbing. It's manipulative. It's also the only way this works. Martin won't believe submission that comes too easily. He'll only believe surrender that looks like he broke you. So we're going to make it look exactly like that. Over the next 3 weeks, I learned things I'd never wanted to know. I learned how trauma victims flinch, how they make themselves smaller, how they avoid eye contact and speak in diminished voices and constantly monitor for threats. I learned the body language of defeat, the speech patterns of submission, the 1,000 tiny ways that broken people signal they've given up fighting. And I practiced. Endlessly. Lydia would simulate interrogations where I had to maintain cover while being verbally attacked. Would create scenarios where I had to feed false information while looking desperate to please. Would test whether I could sell submission convincingly enough to fool paranoid alphas. It was exhausting. More exhausting than physical training would have been, because I was learning to perform my own destruction. Learning to become the broken woman Martin had tried to create through actual torture. You're too healthy, Lydia said during week 2. You still move like someone who hasn't been broken. Martin will notice immediately. So, what do I do? I asked. We make you look broken, Lydia said. Controlled bruising. Strategic marks that suggest recent abuse. Weight loss to imply you haven't been eating well. Physical evidence that supports the psychological performance. You're going to hurt me? Deliberately? So I look convincing. The Alpha King is going to hurt you, Lydia corrected. Publicly. Enough that when Martin sees you, he believes Rowan broke what he couldn't. It won't be pleasant, Naomi, but it's necessary. That night, Rowan explained the plan in detail. I'll stage a public confrontation, he said. Make it look like you tried to escape. I'll discipline you in front of witnesses. Nothing that causes permanent damage, but enough that you'll have visible marks. Then I'll return you to Martin with an apology that you were too difficult to handle. He'll see the bruises, hear the story, believe you've been defeated by treatment harsher than his own. And I'll accept marriage to Garrett, I said, my voice flat. And you'll accept marriage to Garrett, Rowan confirmed. But Naomi, his expression was troubled. The marriage won't be a performance. It'll be real. Legally binding. You'll actually be Garrett's wife for however long this operation takes. That means enduring whatever he does. Accepting whatever treatment he demands. Living that nightmare without breaking cover. I know, I said. I agree to this. I'm not backing out now. You should, Rowan said bluntly. Because I'm realizing what I'm asking of you. Realizing the cost of strategic suffering. And I'm not sure revenge is worth what you're going to pay for it. That's my decision, I said. Not yours. You offered the bargain. I accepted. Now we both live with what that means. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. 3 more days. Then we stage your escape attempt. Then I return you to Martin. Then you begin the actual infiltration. Those final 3 days passed too quickly. Lydia drilled me relentlessly on maintaining cover, on feeding false intelligence, on surviving interrogation. I practiced submission until it felt natural, practiced defeat until I almost believed it myself. And I tried not to think about what came next. About Garrett. About marriage. About months of enduring abuse for strategic purposes. On the final day, Rowan came to my rooms, looking grim. Tonight, we staged the confrontation. I need you to understand, what I'm about to do will hurt. Will leave marks. Will make you question everything. But it's necessary for the cover.
Can you handle that?
I can handle anything for revenge, I said, and tried to believe it. That night, Rowan staged my escape attempt in front of his entire household. Guards, servants, advisors, everyone witnessed the Alpha King catch me running, witnessed him drag me back, witnessed him deliver discipline that left bruises on my arms and a split lip I could taste blood from. It wasn't the worst pain I'd endured. 6 months in Martin's dungeons had been objectively worse. But this pain had purpose, had an audience, had witnesses who would report to Martin that yes, the stubborn Omega had finally been broken. When it was over, Rowan pulled me close and whispered, "I'm sorry. Remember, this serves a purpose. This gets you revenge." "I know," I said through a split lip. "Just make sure it's worth it. Make sure Martin actually falls. Because if I endure this and he still wins..." "He won't," Rowan promised. "Martin is going to learn that destroying people makes them dangerous. That the survivors he creates become the weapons that destroy him." The next morning, Rowan returned to Iron Ridge with public apology to Martin that I'd been too difficult to manage, too defiant to be useful, too broken to be worth keeping. Martin accepted me back with a smile that promised violence. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'll succeed where you failed. She'll learn to submit under my teaching." "I'm sure she will," Rowan said, his voice carrying something Martin didn't catch, a promise that this was a trap, that I was a weapon, that Martin was walking into destruction orchestrated by the very victim he'd tried to kill. As Rowan's car drove away, Martin gripped my arm, hard enough to hurt, possessive enough to establish dominance. "Welcome home, Naomi. Ready to finally accept reality? Ready to marry my son and stop this pointless defiance?" I lowered my eyes, flinched appropriately, made my voice small and defeated. "Yes, Alpha Martin. I'll marry Garrett. I'll legitimize your claim to Crimson Vale. I'll be whatever you need me to be." It was a performance. It was a strategy. It was a calculated submission designed to make Martin believe he'd won. But saying the words out loud, agreeing to marry the son of my parents' murderer, felt like betrayal of everything I'd refused for 6 months. This was the price of revenge. This was strategic suffering. This was what I'd volunteered for when I'd begged Rowan not to leave me to die. And I'd spend the next 6 months learning whether survival was actually worth what it cost. Naomi is literally learning to perform trauma so convincingly that Martin believes she's broken and I am stressed. Method acting the role of defeated Omega while actually being an undercover spy. The layers. If you're already invested in seeing her pull this off, hit that subscribe button because next chapter, the marriage happens and things get dark. Like really dark. Strategic suffering is dark. You've been warned. Subscribe anyway. I have a question. Can performing trauma convincingly avoid creating real trauma? Is Rowan feeling guilty yet? The wedding happened 2 weeks after my return to Iron Ridge, and it was exactly as horrifying as I'd anticipated. I stood in front of witnesses wearing a dress Martin had chosen. White, traditional, designed to symbolize purity I definitely didn't possess after 6 months of imprisonment and 3 weeks of strategic abuse. Garrett stood beside me looking smug, like he'd won a prize instead of being handed a weapon disguised as a wife. "Do you, Naomi Kalos, take Garrett Elliott as your mate and husband, accepting his authority and protection for the duration of your bond?" I'd rehearsed this moment with Lydia a dozen times. Knew exactly how to make my voice sound defeated but compliant. How to look like I'd accepted reality rather than chosen strategy. "I do," I said, and felt pieces of my soul crack with the lie. Garrett's hand found mine, his grip too tight, possessive in ways that made my skin crawl. I do, he said, his voice carrying satisfaction that everyone else probably interpreted as joy, but I recognized as dominance. Then by pack law and moon goddess blessing, I pronounce you mated and bound. May your union bring strength to Iron Ridge and legitimacy to Crimson Vale's absorption. The crowd applauded. Martin beamed with victory. And I became Garrett Elliott's wife, legally bound to the son of the man who'd murdered my parents. The reception was torture of different kind. I had to smile, had to accept congratulations, had to pretend I was happy instead of screaming inside. Martin gave speech about forgiveness and second chances and how even traitors' daughters could find redemption through proper submission. I wanted to vomit, wanted to scream that it was all lies, all fabrication, all strategic manipulation. But I kept my expression neutral, my responses minimal, my body language suggesting I'd accepted defeat. "You look beautiful," Garrett whispered during the first dance, his hands on my waist in ways that felt like ownership rather than affection. "Much better than when you were defying father. Submission suits you." "Thank you," I said, the words ashes in my mouth. "I'm glad you finally understood reality. Glad father broke what needed breaking. Glad." He pulled me closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Glad you're finally mine. Do you understand what that means, Naomi? You're mine now. My wife. My property. Everything you do requires my permission. Every word you speak reflects on me. You exist to serve me, to obey me, to make me look good in front of the pack. Are we clear?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice submissive even as rage burned in my chest. "We're clear."
Good.
Garrett's hands tightened painfully. "Because I've been very patient waiting for you to accept your place. Very restrained while father tried to break you. But now you're mine, and I'm not as gentle as father was. So I suggest you remember your promises. Remember that submission isn't optional anymore. Remember that disappointing me has consequences." I nodded, made myself smaller, gave him exactly the response he expected from broken Omega finally accepting her place. And I cataloged every threat, every implication, every piece of evidence that Garrett was exactly the monster I'd need him to be for this to work. Because if Garrett was cruel enough, paranoid enough, controlling enough, I could use that. Could use his need for dominance against him. Could feed him lies disguised as desperate attempts to please him. The reception finally ended, and Garrett led me to our quarters, rooms in Martin's estate that would be my prison for the next 6 months. The suite was nice enough, but I barely noticed the decor. I was too focused on surviving the wedding night, on maintaining cover during the most vulnerable moment of infiltration. "Nervous?" Garrett asked, closing the door behind us. "Yes," I admitted, because lying about obvious fear would make him suspicious.
Good.
"You should be." He moved closer, and I forced myself not to flinch. "I'm not like father, Naomi. He wanted you broken through fear. I want you broken through understanding exactly who owns you now. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, though I didn't.
Not yet.
Not until Garrett showed me exactly what he meant by ownership. What happened that night wasn't the worst thing I'd endured. 6 months in Martin's dungeons still held that distinction. But it was close. Garrett was cruel in ways Martin hadn't been, possessive in ways that made Martin's control look gentle by comparison. And I endured it. Endured everything. Because this was strategic suffering. Because this served a purpose. Because every moment of abuse was evidence. Every act of cruelty was something I could eventually use to destroy him. But Moon Goddess, it cost. A cost in ways I hadn't anticipated. Ways that made me question whether Rowan had been right, whether revenge was worth this price, whether I should have just accepted death on that execution platform. Morning came too slowly and too fast simultaneously. Garrett left early for patrol duties, and I finally had space to breathe, to process, to remember I was performing victimhood rather than actually being victim. Except the distinction felt increasingly meaningless. Strategic suffering still left marks. Calculated abuse still hurt. And performing trauma long enough meant experiencing trauma, regardless of why you'd volunteered for it. A knock at the door. I opened it to find Lydia's assistant, a young woman named Claire who worked in the kitchens. She pressed something into my hand, a small communication device disguised as jewelry. "From the Alpha King," she whispered. "4 updates." And Naomi, her voice dropped even lower. "He says if it's too much, if you need extraction." "I don't," I interrupted, perhaps too quickly.
Ai fine.
"Tell him I'm maintaining cover. Tell him." I stopped, not sure what to say. That I was surviving? That strategic suffering was destroying me? That I questioned everything? "Tell him the plan is working," I said finally. "Martin believes I'm broken. Garrett believes I'm his. And I'm gathering evidence exactly as intended. No extraction necessary." After Claire left, I activated the communication device and sent my first report to Rowan. Marriage completed. Cover maintained. Beginning intelligence gathering.
No complications.
It was a lie. There were complications everywhere. But admitting that felt like admitting weakness, felt like suggesting I couldn't handle what I'd volunteered for.
So elite.
To Rowan. To myself. To everyone. And I began the real work of infiltration. Over the next weeks, I learned Garrett's patterns, his routines, his vulnerabilities. Learned that he bragged to his wife about his father's plans when he'd been drinking. Learned that he kept documents in his private office that probably shouldn't be accessible. Learned that controlling men like Garrett assumed defeated women weren't smart enough to weaponize information they accidentally provided. I played my role perfectly. Submissive wife. Defeated Omega. Woman who'd finally accepted her place. And while everyone believed the performance, I gathered intelligence. Martin was planning territorial expansion into neutral zones. Had been systematically bribing council members to look the other way. Had fabricated evidence against 2 other packs he intended to absorb through accusations of treason. Everything Rowan needed to expose Martin's pattern of conspiracy. Everything that would prove my parents weren't isolated victims, but part of systematic corruption. I fed the information through the communication device, encrypted and careful. And Rowan sent back instructions. "Good work. Keep gathering. I need documentation of the bribes specifically. Council members' names, amounts, dates. That's what will make the case irrefutable." So I kept gathering, kept enduring, kept surviving each day while cataloging evidence that would eventually destroy the family I'd married into. But the cost was mounting. I woke from nightmares where I couldn't remember if I was performing or being performed upon. Had moments where submission felt natural instead of strategic. Caught myself flinching at sounds that shouldn't frighten me, avoiding eye contact that had once been habitual. I was becoming the broken woman I'd been pretending to be. And I wasn't sure how to stop it. 2 months into the marriage, Garrett brought home guests. Other alphas Martin was courting for alliance. I had to serve them, play hostess, smile, while they discussed territorial acquisitions like they were trading livestock. "Your wife is very obedient," one alpha commented to Garrett. Much improved from the reports I heard about her defiance. "Proper treatment yields proper results," Garrett said, his hand possessive on my shoulder. "Father tried to break her through punishment. I broke her through understanding who she belongs to. It's about psychology, not just pain." "Fascinating," the alpha said, studying me like I was a specimen. "And she accepts your authority completely now?" "No more defiance." "None," Garrett confirmed. "She's learned that submission is preferable to consequences." "Haven't you, Naomi?" "Yes," I said, the word automatic now. "I've learned." They continued discussing me like I wasn't present, making observations about broken omegas and effective control techniques. And I stood there, playing my role, cataloging everything while dying inside. That night, after the guests left and Garrett fell asleep, I sent Rowan a desperate message. "How much longer? How much more evidence do you need? I don't know how much longer I can maintain this." His response came hours later. 3 more months minimum. I need evidence of the council bribes, documentation of the planned territorial expansion, and testimony from someone inside Martin's circle. You're close, Naomi. Don't break now. Don't let him win when you're this close to making him pay. 3 more months. 90 more days. 2,000 more hours of performing defeat, enduring abuse, becoming someone I didn't recognize. I wasn't sure I'd survive it. Wasn't sure I wanted to. But I'd started this. Had volunteered for strategic suffering. Had begged Rowan not to leave me on that execution platform. Now I had to endure the consequences of that choice. Had to see it through. Had to make sure the price I was paying actually bought something worth having. So I kept gathering evidence. Kept enduring abuse. Kept surviving. And I prayed the revenge would be worth what it was costing me. 4 months into my marriage, I stood in Garrett's office while he raged about some perceived disrespect from a subordinate, and I realized with creeping horror that I'd stopped flinching. Not because the fear was gone, because I'd learned to swallow it so deeply it no longer showed on my face. Because performing submission had become so automatic I didn't have to think about it anymore. I was becoming the woman I'd been pretending to be. And I couldn't tell anymore where the performance ended and reality began. Are you even listening? Garrett snapped, his hand suddenly gripping my chin hard enough to bruise. I asked you a question. I hadn't heard a question. Had been dissociating, disappearing into my own head while my body remained present. But admitting that would suggest defiance, would imply I wasn't paying appropriate attention. I apologize, I said, the words mechanical now.
I'm listening.
Please repeat the question. Garrett's eyes narrowed, studying me with suspicion that made my heart race. You've been distracted lately. Distant. Is there something you're not telling me? No, I said immediately. Nothing. I'm just tired. The social obligations, the household management, everything, it's exhausting. It wasn't even a lie. I was exhausted. Exhausted from performing constantly, from gathering evidence while maintaining cover, from enduring abuse that was supposed to be strategic but felt increasingly real. Tired, Garrett repeated, his grip tightening. My wife is tired from basic household duties. How disappointing. Perhaps I've been too lenient. Perhaps you need reminder of what happens when you fail to meet expectations. What followed was reminder I didn't need, but received anyway. And afterward, lying in bed while Garrett slept, I activated the communication device with shaking hands and sent Rowan a message I'd been avoiding for months. I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm breaking. Not strategically, actually breaking. The performance is becoming reality, and I don't know how to stop it. Please, either give me what I need to finish this or extract me. I can't endure 3 more months of this. The response came surprisingly quickly. Meet me tomorrow. Old Chapel ruins outside Iron Ridge territory.
Noon. Come alone. We need to talk.
I almost didn't go. I almost stayed in the safety of my role, maintained cover, kept enduring. But something in Rowan's message suggested this wasn't optional. That he recognized I'd reached breaking point and needed intervention before I shattered completely. The next morning, I told Garrett I was visiting the pack healer for women's health appointment, lie that was humiliating enough he wouldn't question it. Then I slipped away to the chapel ruins where Rowan waited. He looked different than I remembered. Older. More worn. Like 4 months of watching me suffer from distance had cost him too. Naomi, he said, and his voice carried concern I wasn't expecting. Moon goddess, you look broken, I supplied. That was the goal, wasn't it? Make me look defeated enough that Martin and Garrett believe the performance? Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. I'm so convincingly broken, I can't tell the difference anymore. Rowan moved closer, his hands gentle on my shoulders in stark contrast to Garrett's constant roughness. This has gone too far. I'm extracting you.
Today.
We'll fabricate some reason you died or escaped or...
No, interrupted.
We're too close. I've endured 4 months of hell. I'm not stopping now when I'm finally getting the evidence you need. The evidence isn't worth this, Rowan said firmly. Isn't worth watching you destroy yourself for revenge. Naomi, you're not just performing trauma anymore. You're experiencing it. And his voice roughened. I put you in this position. I'm responsible for what it's costing you. So, I'm ending it.
Now.
Before you break beyond repair. What if I'm already broken beyond repair? I asked, and felt tears I'd been suppressing for months finally surface. What if 4 months of strategic suffering has damaged me so badly that extracting me doesn't fix anything? What if I've become someone who can't exist outside this role anymore? Then we deal with that, Rowan said. But we deal with it somewhere safe. Somewhere Garrett can't hurt you. Somewhere you can heal instead of just enduring. He cupped my face carefully.
Naomi, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry I asked this of you. Sorry I didn't understand the cost until watching you pay it. Sorry I've been using you as a weapon when you're actually a person who deserves protection. I wanted to be angry. Wanted to rage at him for putting me in this position, for using me, for not anticipating how badly this would damage me. But I was too exhausted. Too broken. Too empty. The evidence, I said. Did I at least get you what you need? Did my suffering actually accomplish something? Yes, Rowan said. You've given me everything. Documentation of Martin's bribes. Evidence of planned territorial expansion. Proof that your parents' case was fabricated. Everything I need to expose him publicly and destroy him legally. You've succeeded, Naomi. The mission is complete. Then why do I feel like I've failed? I asked. Why does victory feel like loss? Because revenge costs, Rowan said quietly. Because you paid for justice with pieces of yourself. Because winning doesn't erase suffering. He pulled me close, and I let myself feel safe for the first time in months, even though I knew it was temporary. But Naomi, you survived. Despite everything, you survived. That counts for something. Does it? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, survival just means enduring longer. Means experiencing more pain. Means becoming someone I don't recognize. I'm not sure survival is actually victory. It is, Rowan insisted. Because you're still here. Still capable of questioning. Still strong enough to recognize you need help. That's not brokenness. That's self-awareness earned through suffering. And self-awareness means healing is possible. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that extraction meant safety, that healing was achievable, that I could eventually be someone other than the victim I performed for 4 months. But standing in those chapel ruins, breaking down in front of the Alpha King who'd weaponized me, I wasn't sure belief was enough. What happens now? I asked. You extract me. Then what? Martin will know I was spy. Will know everything was performance. Will come for revenge. Martin will be too busy defending himself against treason charges to come for anyone, Rowan said. I'm moving forward with prosecution now. Tomorrow. With all the evidence you've gathered. He won't have time to retaliate before he's stripped of everything. And Garrett? I asked. What happened to him? Exile, Rowan said. For complicity in his father's crimes. He'll never be allowed in any of the 5 territories again. He'll never hurt you or anyone else. Justice. Finally, everything I'd endured for 4 months had achieved its purpose. Martin would fall. Garrett would be exiled. Crimson Veil would be restored. So, why did I feel empty instead of vindicated? I need to go back, I said. One last time. Get my few belongings. Maintain cover until you're ready to move. Garrett expects me back soon, and if I'm late... No, Rowan said firmly. You're not going back. Ever. I don't care about cover anymore. Don't care about maintaining appearances. I care about getting you somewhere safe before Garrett hurts you again. But nothing, Rowan interrupted. The evidence is already secured. The case is already built. You've done your part. Now let me do mine, protect you the way I should have been protecting you all along, instead of using you as bait. I should have argued. Should have insisted on seeing it through. But I was so tired. So broken. So desperate to stop pretending, stop performing, stop being someone I hated.
Okay, I said.
Extract me.
Get me out.
I can't. I can't do this anymore. Can't be Garrett's wife for even one more day. Can't endure one more night of strategic suffering that feels less strategic and more just suffering. Then come with me, Rowan said, offering his hand. Come somewhere safe. Let me fix what I broke. He stopped. Let me try to make this right, even though I know I can never fully repair the damage I've caused. I took his hand, let him lead me away from Iron Ridge, away from the marriage I'd endured for evidence, away from the performance that had nearly destroyed me. And I tried to believe that extraction meant safety, that healing was possible, that I could eventually be someone other than the weapon I'd become. But 4 months of strategic suffering had taught me that believing in safety was the first step toward being disappointed by reality. Still, at least I was trying. At least I was choosing survival over continued degradation. At least I was accepting that revenge wasn't worth what it cost if the cost was losing myself completely. That had to count for something, even if I wasn't sure what. Naomi just told Rowan, I can't tell if I'm performing trauma or experiencing it anymore, and honestly same. The psychological complexity. If you're invested in seeing whether she can actually heal from 4 months of strategic self-destruction, hit subscribe because the next chapter is Martin's downfall, and it's going to be satisfying. Also, we need to see if Naomi survives her own victory. Subscribe. The trial happened 3 days after my extraction, and I watched from the observation room while Rowan dismantled Martin's entire life with evidence I'd helped gather. Elder Tobias presided, his ancient face stern as he addressed the assembled council and representatives from all 5 territories. Alpha Martin Elliott, you stand accused of conspiracy to murder the previous Alpha King, systematic territorial theft through fabricated evidence, bribery of council members, and planned rebellion against Crown authority. How do you plead? Martin stood in chains, the same silver-laced chains I'd worn at my execution, and his face showed fury barely contained. I plead innocent to fabricated charges brought by a jealous king who resents my success, my influence, Your documented crimes, Rowan interrupted, standing from his position. Shall we begin with evidence? Or would you prefer to continue denying before I make denial impossible? Please proceed, Alpha King, Tobias said. What followed was systematic destruction. Rowan presented documentation of Martin's bribes, amounts, dates, council members involved. He showed fabricated evidence Martin had used against my parents, complete with testimony from the forgers Martin had hired. He produced financial records proving systematic theft across multiple territories over 30 years. And he revealed recordings. My recordings. For months of Garrett bragging about his father's schemes, Martin discussing plans in my presence assuming broken Omegas weren't smart enough to weaponize information, conversations that exposed every crime they'd committed. This is a violation of privacy, Martin snarled. You can't use recordings obtained without consent. Actually, I can, Rowan said coldly. Because your daughter-in-law wore the device with full knowledge and consent. Because she volunteered to gather evidence against you. Because you assumed she was defeated when she was actually documenting your every crime. Martin's eyes went wild as he searched the observation room.
Naomi.
That little bitch was spying? For 4 months she was. Was exactly what you made her, Rowan interrupted. A survivor willing to endure anything for revenge. You destroyed her family, tortured her for 6 months. And when you thought you'd finally broken her, she was already mine. Already working to expose you. Already gathering everything needed to ensure you'd face the same fate you gave her parents. The evidence continued. Testimony from victims of Martin's schemes. Documentation of planned territorial expansion. Proof that the previous Alpha King's execution had been orchestrated by Martin specifically to prevent reforms that would have limited Alpha authority. 10 years ago, Rowan said, his voice carrying controlled fury, Martin Elliott murdered my father. Not directly, he was too clever for that. He fabricated evidence of mental instability. He manipulated council members into believing my father was dangerous. He orchestrated the execution disguised as necessary intervention. And he walked away clean, rewarded with territory he used to build his empire of systematic corruption. Lies, Martin said, but his voice lacked conviction now. Testimony, Rowan corrected. From people you bribed. From people you threatened. From people who've been terrified of you for decades, but are finally willing to speak now that you're in chains instead of power. He turned to address the full council. Martin Elliot has been destroying packs and people for 30 years. Crimson Veil wasn't his first victim, just his most recent. And if we don't stop him permanently, he won't be the last alpha to use fabricated treason charges for territorial theft. The council deliberated for 3 hours. I watched through the observation window, numb to everything except confirmation that my suffering had purpose, that 4 months of strategic degradation had actually achieved something. Finally, Tobias returned with verdict. The evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. Alpha Martin Elliot, you are found guilty of all charges. The sentence is as follows. You are stripped of rank, territory, and pack. You will serve life imprisonment in Crown custody. Your son Garrett is exiled from all 5 territories for complicity in your crimes. Iron Ridge Pack is disbanded, its members offered integration into neighboring territories. And Crimson Veil. He looked toward the observation window where I stood. Crimson Veil is restored to its rightful heir, Naomi Kalos, with full territorial rights and crown protection against any future false accusations. I should have felt victorious. Should have felt vindicated. Should have felt something other than hollow emptiness. Martin had fallen. Everything I'd endured had accomplished its purpose. Justice had been served. So why did victory feel like ashes? Naomi, Rowan's voice came from behind me. It's done. Martin is imprisoned. Garrett is exiled. Your parents' names are cleared. Everything you suffered for, you've achieved it. I know, I said, my voice flat. I should be happy. Should be grateful. Should feel something other than. I stopped, not sure how to articulate the void where satisfaction should have been. Emptiness, Rowan finished. Because revenge doesn't heal. It just ends the cycle of abuse without erasing the damage already done. Naomi, you won. But winning doesn't mean you're suddenly whole again. Then what does it mean? I asked. What was the point of 4 months of hell if victory feels meaningless? It means Martin can't hurt anyone else, Rowan said. Means other packs won't suffer what Crimson Veil suffered. Means your parents' murders were acknowledged and avenged. That's not meaningless. That's justice. It just doesn't feel satisfying because justice doesn't erase trauma. I watched Martin being dragged away to the same dungeons where he'd kept me. Watched Garrett being escorted toward exile, his face showing no remorse. Watched everything I'd sacrificed for finally achieved. And I felt nothing except exhaustion. What happens now? I asked. I'm supposed to return to Crimson Veil? Let a pack while barely managing my own emotions? Pretend 4 months of strategic suffering didn't break something fundamental in me. No, Rowan said. You're supposed to heal. However long that takes. Whatever that looks like. You're not required to be functional immediately. You're allowed to be damaged by what you endured. And Crimson Veil? I asked. What happens to my territory while I gestured vaguely at myself. Like this? Council will administer it temporarily, Rowan said. Restore infrastructure, recall displaced pack members, manage affairs until you're ready. There's no timeline, no pressure. Just, he moved to stand beside me. Just survive. That's enough for now. Is it? I asked bitterly. Because survival doesn't feel like enough. Feels like prolonged existence without purpose. Feels like I traded quick death for slow emptiness. Then we find new purpose, Rowan said. Purpose beyond revenge. Beyond destroying Martin. purpose in rebuilding instead of just surviving. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to think purpose was possible after spending 4 months performing victimhood, so convincingly I'd become actual victim. But standing in that observation room, watching justice being served while feeling nothing, I wasn't sure belief was enough. "Thank you," I said finally, "for keeping your word, for using the evidence, for making sure Martin actually fell instead of walking away clean like he did with your father. That counts for something, even if I'm too damaged to appreciate it properly." "You'll appreciate it eventually," Rowan said, "when the trauma fades enough to allow other emotions. When healing creates space for satisfaction. When I'm someone other than the weapon you made me," I interrupted. "But Rowan? I'm not sure that person exists anymore. I'm not sure I can ever be anything other than strategic victim who served her purpose and now just exists." "Then we'll figure out what existence looks like," Rowan said.
Together.
"Because I put you in this position. I'm responsible for what it cost you. And I'm committed to helping you rebuild, even if rebuilding takes years." "Why?" I asked. "Why do you care? Mission's complete. Martin's imprisoned. Your revenge is achieved too. Why bother with damaged weapon that's served its purpose?" "Because you're not a weapon," Rowan said firmly. "You're a person I used as weapon. There's a difference. And that person deserves better than being discarded after serving her purpose." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine regret, genuine guilt, genuine commitment to making things right even though he couldn't undo what I'd endured. "Okay," I said finally. "Help me rebuild. Help me become someone other than victim. Help me," my voice broke. "Help me remember who I was before all this. Before execution platforms and strategic suffering and becoming someone I hate." "I will," Rowan promised. "However long it takes. Whatever you need. I'm here." And standing in that observation room, watching Martin's empire crumble while my own sense of self remained fractured, I chose to believe him. Chose to believe healing was possible. Chose to believe I could eventually be someone other than the broken woman I'd performed into reality. It was small choice. Fragile choice. But it was mine. And after 4 months of choices made for strategic purpose, making choice for myself felt like first step toward actually surviving instead of just enduring. So my question is Naomi right that revenge doesn't actually heal? Can Rowan really help her rebuild? 6 weeks after Martin's sentencing, I stood in Crimson Vale for the first time since my parents' execution and felt like an intruder in my own home. The territory had been restored beautifully, pack members returning, infrastructure rebuilt, my parents' estate cleaned and prepared. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. Except I wasn't who I remembered. Wasn't the diplomatic heir who'd grown up here. Wasn't even the defiant prisoner who'd refused to submit. I was someone else entirely. Someone forged by strategic suffering and hollowed out by revenge achieved at too high a cost. "Naomi," Elder Tobias greeted me at the estate entrance. "Welcome home. The pack has been preparing for your return. Everyone is eager to meet their alpha." "I'm not ready to lead," I said immediately. "I know the council restored my rights. No Crimson Vale is legally mine, but Tobias, I'm not capable of leading anyone right now. I can barely manage myself." "No one expects you to be immediately functional," Tobias said gently. "We understand you've been through trauma. That leading will take time. That healing comes before duty. Do you understand?" I asked. "Do you actually understand what 4 months of strategic suffering does to someone? Because I'm not sure I understand it myself. Not sure I can articulate the difference between performing victimhood and becoming victim. Not sure." I stopped, overwhelmed. "Then don't articulate it," Tobias said. "Just be here. Let the pack see you. Let them know you're alive, you're home, you're beginning to heal. That's enough for now." Over the next weeks, I tried to settle into Crimson Vale. Tried to remember what it felt like to be safe, to be valued, to be something other than strategic asset or broken victim. It was harder than anticipated. I flinched at sudden movements, avoided eye contact instinctively, found myself performing submission without thinking about it. For months of being Garrett's wife had carved patterns into my behavior that didn't disappear just because I'd been extracted. Pack members noticed, tried to be understanding, but their careful pity felt worse than Martin's cruelty somehow. At least cruelty had been honest. Pity felt like confirmation that I was permanently damaged, broken beyond repair, too destroyed to ever be the leader they needed. "You're healing," Rowan said during one of his visits. He'd been checking on me weekly, bringing resources and support that I appreciated even when I couldn't express gratitude. "I know it doesn't feel like it. Know you're frustrated by how slowly it's progressing. But Naomi, you're making progress."
Can you see that?
"No," I admitted. "I see someone who still flinches when doors close too loudly. Someone who can't stop performing submission even when it's not necessary. Someone who," my voice broke. "Someone who spent 4 months being exactly what Martin wanted me to be, and now I can't remember how to be anything else." "Then we start smaller," Rowan said. "Forget being Alpha. Forget leading Crimson Veil. Just practice being Naomi. Practice existing without purpose beyond healing. Practice." "Practice what?" I demanded. "Practice being someone I don't recognize? Practice pretending the damage isn't permanent? Practice hoping healing is possible when everything suggests it's not." "Yes," Rowan said simply. "That's exactly what you practice. Because hope is choice, not feeling. Because healing starts with believing it's possible, not waiting until you feel better. Because what?" I interrupted. "Because you feel guilty for what you put me through? Because making me heal somehow absolves you of responsibility." Rowan flinched, and I felt satisfaction at landing blow before immediately feeling guilty for weaponizing his concern. "I'm sorry," I said. "That wasn't fair. You're trying to help, and I'm angry," Rowan finished. "Which is healthy. Which is better than the numbness you were experiencing. Naomi, be angry. Be furious. Rage at me for using you, for putting you in that position, for not extracting you sooner. That's healing. That's processing. That's better than accepting damage as permanent identity." "Is it?" I asked. "Because anger doesn't change what happened. Doesn't undo 4 months of strategic suffering. Doesn't make me someone who can actually lead Crimson Veil instead of just existing here like broken ornament everyone pities." "No," Rowan agreed. "But anger means you're still fighting. Still refusing to accept victimhood as permanent. Still believing you deserve better than what you got. And that's the first step toward actually becoming better." I wanted to argue, wanted to insist that anger was just another form of damage, that fighting didn't mean healing, that deserving better didn't make me capable of achieving it. But sitting in my parents' estate, surrounded by pack I was supposed to lead but couldn't, I recognized something. Rowan was right. Anger was progress. Refusing to accept damage as identity was healing. Fighting meant I hadn't completely given up. What if I'm never ready to lead? I asked quietly. What if trauma has destroyed whatever made me capable of being alpha? What if I spent so much time performing submission, I can't remember how to command? "Then you learn again," Rowan said. "Or you choose differently. Naomi, you're not required to be alpha just because Crimson Veil is yours by birth. You're allowed to appoint someone else, to step back, to choose healing over duty. That's not failure. That's wisdom about your limitations." The idea should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like relief. Like permission to stop forcing myself into role I wasn't ready for. Like acceptance that healing mattered more than fulfilling expectations. "What would that look like?" I asked. "Appointing someone else? What happens to me?" "You become advisor instead of leader," Rowan suggested. "Consultant who understands Crimson Veil's needs but doesn't carry direct responsibility. You heal at whatever pace healing requires without pressure to be immediately functional. He stopped. You prioritize your own welfare instead of everyone else's. For once. For as long as you need. It was tempting. So tempting. Stop performing capability. Stop pretending damage was manageable. Stop forcing myself to be something I couldn't sustain. But it also felt like admitting Martin had won. Like confirming that 4 months of strategic suffering had broken me permanently. Like accepting that revenge had cost more than it was worth. I need time, I said. Time to decide. Time to figure out who I am now. Time to... I looked at Rowan. Time to stop being a weapon or victim and become someone who actually has agency beyond surviving. Take all the time you need, Rowan said. Crimson Veil will wait. And if waiting takes years, if healing requires you never lead, that's acceptable too. Your welfare matters more than territorial leadership. Over the following months, I slowly began finding equilibrium. Not healing exactly. Not becoming who I was before. But finding a new identity built from ruins of strategic suffering. I appointed trusted Beta to lead Crimson Veil temporarily. Became an advisor who helped guide without carrying direct responsibility. Focused on my own healing instead of everyone else's needs. And gradually, painfully, slowly, incompletely, I began believing that maybe survival was enough. That maybe rebuilding from strategic suffering was victory in its own right. That maybe I didn't have to be alpha or victim or weapon. Could just be Naomi. Damaged but healing. Traumatized but functional. Imperfect but trying. It wasn't the triumph I'd imagined when I'd begged Rowan not to leave me on that execution platform. Wasn't the vindication I'd expected after 4 months of hell. But it was real. It was mine. And that had to count for something. Even if I was still figuring out exactly what. Naomi just realized she might never be ready to lead, and honestly, that's the most emotionally mature thing anyone in this story has said. The growth. If you're invested in seeing whether healing is actually possible after strategic self-destruction, hit subscribe because the final 2 chapters deal with Naomi choosing to live instead of just survive. You don't want to miss this resolution. 9 months after Martin's sentencing, I woke from a nightmare about Garrett and realized I'd gone 3 days without thinking about him constantly. 3 days. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd managed in the previous months. More than I'd thought possible when everything was raw and fresh and overwhelming. Progress. Tiny, fragile progress. But progress nonetheless. I found myself in the healing springs that had made Crimson Veil famous. Warm water that supposedly had therapeutic properties for both physical and psychological wounds. My parents had believed in the spring's power. Had built the entire pack culture around healing instead of warfare. Maybe they'd known something I was only now beginning to understand. That healing required more than just time. Required actively choosing wellness over familiar pain. Required believing recovery was possible even when damage felt permanent. You're here early, a voice said, and I turned to find Rowan standing at the edge of the springs. He'd been visiting weekly, checking on my progress, offering support that I appreciated even when I couldn't articulate gratitude. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Had nightmare. Decided productive use of insomnia was therapeutic bathing rather than lying awake cataloging everything wrong with me. Sounds healthy, Rowan said with a slight smile. May I join you? Or would you prefer solitude? Join me, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. 3 months ago, I'd avoided everyone. 6 months ago, I could barely speak without performing a submission. Now I actually wanted company. I wanted a conversation that wasn't about trauma or healing or how damaged I was. Rowan settled into the water at respectful distance, and we sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before he spoke. You look better, he observed. Not just physically. Something's shifted. I went 3 days without constant thoughts about Garrett, I said. 3 whole days where trauma wasn't my primary identity. I stopped, Emotion thick in my throat. That's progress I didn't think was possible. That's significant progress, Rowan agreed. And Naomi? I'm proud of you.
For surviving.
For healing. For not giving up even when it would have been easier. Don't, I said quickly. Don't be proud. Don't make this about your guilt or your need for absolution. This is my healing. My progress. Not something you get to claim credit for. You're right, Rowan said immediately.
I'm sorry.
Your healing is yours. I have no right to feel proud when I'm the one who put you in a position requiring healing in the first place. We sat in silence again, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Wasn't numb. I wasn't overwhelmed. Just tired. Tired in a normal way, not traumatized. Tiredness that could be fixed with sleep, not therapy. I've been thinking, I said finally, about Crimson Veil, about leadership, about what I actually want instead of what I think I should want. And, Rowan prompted, and I don't want to be alpha, I admitted. Don't want direct authority or constant responsibility or the pressure of leading while still healing. But, I turned to face him. But I do want Crimson Veil to thrive. Want to help rebuild pack culture around healing instead of dominance. Want to create something that honors my parents' vision without requiring me to sacrifice my own wellness. That sounds reasonable, Rowan said. What would that look like practically? I'd formally appoint Beta Kendra as Alpha, I said. Transfer direct authority to someone actually capable of leadership. But I'd remain involved as an advisor. Help guide philosophy without carrying day-to-day responsibility. Build something sustainable while also prioritizing my own healing. Is that what you want? Rowan asked. Or what do you think is an acceptable compromise between healing and duty? I thought about it. Really thought about it. It's what I want. Actually, I want it. Not because I'm scared of leadership, but because I recognize my limitations, accept my damage, and choose wellness over pushing myself into a role I'm not ready for. That's growth. That's the agency. That's the opposite of letting Martin win. Then do it, Rowan said simply. Appoint Kendra. Build advisory role. Create life that serves both Crimson Veil and your healing. No one can criticize that choice except you. People will say I'm weak, I pointed out. Will say trauma made me incapable. Will say things that don't matter, Rowan interrupted. Because you'll know the truth, that choosing the appropriate role requires strength. That recognizing limitations is wisdom. That prioritizing wellness doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave enough to be honest about what you can handle. I let that sink in. Let myself believe it. Let myself accept that maybe choosing healing over duty wasn't surrender. It was a victory of a different kind. Was refusing to let strategic suffering define my entire future. There's something else, I said, and this part was harder. Something I've been avoiding processing.
About you.
About us. I stopped, not sure how to articulate it. About the complicated relationship between the victim and the person who weaponized them. Rowan supplied carefully. Yes. That. I took a breath. Rowan, you saved me from execution. But you also used me. Put me in a position that damages me possibly permanently. And I don't know how to feel about that. Don't know if I should be grateful or furious. Don't know if you're the person who saved me or the person who broke me. Both, Rowan said quietly. I'm both. And that's an uncomfortable truth we both have to live with. I can't undo what I asked of you. Can't erase 4 months of strategic suffering. Can't make it acceptable that I used you as a weapon. But Naomi, he met my eyes. I can be here while you heal from it. Can support your recovery. Can accept that you have every right to hate me while also working to earn something better than hatred. I don't hate you, I said, and realized it was true. I'm angry, yes. Resentful about what you put me through. Furious that revenge cost so much. But I don't hate you. Because this part was the hardest. Because you kept your word. Use the evidence. Made sure Martin actually fell. And you've been here, every week, supporting my healing without demanding gratitude or forgiveness. That counts for something, even if I'm not sure what. It counts for me trying, Rowan said. Trying to be better than the person who weaponized you. Trying to support instead of use. He stopped. Trying to care about your wellness more than my guilt. Because your healing shouldn't be about absolving me. Should be about you becoming someone who can exist beyond trauma. We sat in the healing springs and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly. Not absolution. Just acceptance. Acceptance that Rowan was complicated. That I could be grateful and angry simultaneously. That he'd saved me and damaged me, and both things were true. I'm going to formally appoint Kendra tomorrow, I said. Make my advisory role official. Build life that serves both healing and purpose. And Rowan, I looked at him. Thank you.
For supporting this choice.
For not pressuring me to be alpha when I'm not ready. For accepting that healing looks different than leadership. You're welcome, Rowan said. And Naomi? I'm here. However long it takes. Whatever you need. Not because I feel guilty, though I do. But because I genuinely want to see you thrive. Want to see you become someone who exists beyond what I put you through. Want. He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. Want to know you're okay. That's all. Just want to know healing is actually possible. Me too, I admitted. And maybe this was scary. Maybe it is. Possible, I mean. Maybe 9 months of progress means 12 months will be better. 18 months even better. Maybe. Maybe healing doesn't have a timeline, Rowan finished. Maybe it's just an ongoing choice to prioritize wellness over familiar pain. To choose growth over accepting damage as identity. To believe recovery is possible even when it's low. Yes, I said.
That.
Exactly that. We stayed in the springs until dawn, talking about rebuilding and healing, and what life looked like after strategic suffering. And for the first time, since my execution day, I felt something resembling hope. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just hope that maybe survival was enough. That maybe I could build a life beyond revenge. That maybe strategic suffering didn't have to define my entire existence. It was fragile hope. Tentative hope. But it was mine. And after 9 months of feeling nothing but emptiness, feeling anything was progress. So this is my questions. Is choosing an advisory role over leadership the right decision? Can Naomi ever truly forgive Rowan? 18 months after Martin's sentencing, I stood in Crimson Vale's restored pack house and barely recognized the woman I'd been when I'd first begged Rowan not to leave me to die. That woman had been desperate, broken, willing to become anything to survive another day. This woman, the one I was becoming, was different. Still damaged, yes. Still healing, absolutely. But no longer defined solely by trauma. No longer existing only as victim or weapon or broken thing requiring pity. I was Naomi Kalos, advisor to Alpha Kendra, daughter of murdered leaders, survivor of strategic suffering, woman slowly, painfully, incompletely rebuilding herself from ruins of revenge. And that was enough. For now, it was enough. Naomi, Kendra called from across the room where she was coordinating pack business with efficiency I envied. We have request from Iron Ridge refugees. Several families displaced when Martin's pack was disbanded. They're asking sanctuary here. Thoughts? I moved to review the request and noticed something significant. I didn't flinch at Iron Ridge's mention. Didn't immediately spiral into trauma response. Just assess the situation professionally. Progress. Real, measurable progress. They weren't complicit in Martin's crimes, I said after reading documentation. Just victims of his corruption who lost everything when his pack was dismantled. We should offer sanctuary. That's what Crimson Vale does, provides healing space for displaced wolves. Agreed, Kendra said, making notation. You're good at this, you know. At understanding what the pack needs. At seeing beyond personal trauma to serve broader welfare. Sure you don't want to reclaim alpha authority? Very sure, I said with a smile. I'm good at advising. You're good at leading. This arrangement works for both of us. After the meeting, I found myself walking Crimson Vale's restored territory, processing how far I'd come. The healing springs that had nearly claimed my life now felt therapeutic. The pack house where I'd grown up now felt like home instead of ghost of better past. The wolves I'd once thought would pity me forever now treated me as valuable pack member instead of broken victim.
Iderabuil.
Not back to who I was before. That woman was gone, destroyed by strategic suffering and revenge pursued at terrible cost. But rebuilt into someone new. Someone forged by trauma, but not defined by it. Someone who'd survived and was learning to thrive. Naomi. Rowan's voice interrupted my reflections. He'd arrived unannounced, but I didn't startle anymore. Had learned to recognize his presence as safe instead of threatening. Do you have time to talk? Always, I said and meant it. Over the past 18 months, Rowan and I had developed strange friendship built on shared guilt and mutual support. He couldn't undo what he'd put me through. I couldn't forget that he'd weaponized me. But we could and did choose to move forward anyway. We walked together toward the springs, and I noticed Rowan looked different. Lighter. Less burdened by guilt that had been weighing him down. You seem better, I observed. What changed? I took your advice, Rowan admitted. About accepting that some damage can't be fixed, only moved past. About choosing to build something new instead of constantly trying to repair what's broken. He stopped. About forgiving myself enough to actually be useful instead of just guilty. Good, I said. Because your guilt was getting exhausting. Not because I wanted you to stop feeling bad, because I wanted you to channel that guilt into something productive instead of just self-flagellation. Rowan laughed, genuine laugh that suggested he'd finally found equilibrium. Fair point. So, I'm channeling it. Reform pack law regarding vulnerable wolves. Established protections against fabricated evidence. Created oversight system that makes another Martin impossible. Or, at least significantly more difficult. I felt tears sting. That's exactly what needed to happen. What my parents would have wanted. What strategic suffering was supposed to achieve beyond just destroying Martin. I know, Rowan said. And Naomi? None of it would have been possible without you. Without the evidence you gathered. Without you enduring 4 months of hell to expose systematic corruption. Without me volunteering to be weapon, I finished. I know. And Rowan? I've decided something. About all of it. About the strategic suffering and revenge and price I paid. What have you decided? I took breath. Articulated truth I'd been processing for months. I've decided it was worth it. Not because the suffering was acceptable, it wasn't. Not because revenge felt satisfying, it didn't. But because the systemic changes you're making, the protections you're establishing, the other packs that won't suffer what Crimson Vale suffered, that's worth what I paid. That makes strategic suffering mean something beyond just my personal trauma. Are you sure? Rowan asked carefully. Or, are you rationalizing damage to make it feel purposeful? Both, I admitted. I'm sure, and I'm rationalizing. Because that's how complicated truth works. The suffering was real. The damage was extensive. The cost was higher than anticipated. But the results, the changes, the protections, the justice, those are real too. Both things are true simultaneously. That's what I've learned from 18 months of healing. That complexity doesn't require choosing one narrative. Life isn't victim or survivor, damage or growth, trauma or healing. It's all of it, all the time, in constant negotiation. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. You're remarkable, you know that? Surviving strategic suffering would have been enough. But you're actually thriving beyond it. Building new life. Creating purpose beyond revenge. I don't have words for what that is. It's choice, I said simply. Choice to keep trying. Keep healing. Keep believing recovery is possible even when it's low. That's all anyone can do after trauma. Choose to keep going despite damage. Choose growth over accepting brokenness as permanent identity. Choose life over just existing. We reached the springs, and I found myself settling into a familiar spot where I'd processed so much over the past months. Rowan joined me, and we sat in comfortable silence that suggested years of shared history rather than traumatic beginnings. There's something I need to tell you, Rowan said finally. Something I should have said months ago, but was too guilty to articulate properly. What?
I'm sorry.
Genuinely, completely, devastatingly sorry for what I put you through.
For using you.
For not extracting you sooner when I saw how badly it was damaging you. For prioritizing revenge over your welfare. For, his voice roughened. For making you pay price that high for justice that should have been my responsibility to achieve without weaponizing survivors. I know, I said. I've known for months that you regret it. That you carry guilt about it. That you're trying to make it right.
And Rowan?
I accept your apology. Not because it erases damage, but because I recognize genuine remorse when I see it. Because you've spent 18 months supporting my healing instead of just expressing guilt. Because I turned to face him. Because forgiveness is choice too. Choice to stop letting past define present. To acknowledge harm without remaining defined by it. To move forward instead of staying trapped in resentment. So, you forgive me? Rowan asked, and I heard hope mixed with disbelief. I'm choosing to forgive you, I corrected. Present tense. Ongoing action. Not past decision that makes everything okay, but active choice to prioritize healing over holding grudges. To build something positive from ruins of strategic suffering. 2. I stopped as realization hit. To be someone beyond victim or weapon.
To be Naomi.
Just Naomi. Complicated, damaged, healing Naomi who survived strategic suffering and is learning to thrive beyond it. Just Naomi sounds perfect, Rowan said with genuine warmth. We sat in the healing springs as sun set over Crimson Vale, and I felt something settle inside me. Not complete healing, that would take years more. Not absence of trauma, that would probably never fully disappear. But acceptance. Acceptance of complexity. Acceptance that I was both damaged and healing. Acceptance that Rowan was both person who weaponized me and person supporting my recovery. Acceptance that revenge had cost terribly, but achieved something meaningful. Acceptance that 18 months ago, I'd begged an Alpha King not to leave me to die, and that bargain, terrible as it was, had led me here. To Crimson Vale restored. To systemic changes protecting vulnerable wolves. To healing that was slow but real. To life that was complicated but worth living. Thank you, I said to Rowan. For keeping your word. For using the evidence. For supporting my healing. For being complicated enough that I can be angry and grateful simultaneously. For my voice caught. For not leaving me. Not on that execution platform. Not during strategic suffering. Not when healing got hard. Thank you for staying even when staying meant confronting your own guilt. Thank you for surviving, Rowan said. For choosing healing. For building new life from ruins. For being brave enough to be honest about damage instead of pretending you're fine. For he stopped. For being exactly who you needed to be when you needed to be it. That takes strength I can't adequately articulate. The sun finished setting, leaving us in comfortable darkness broken only by moonlight on water. And I realized something profound. I was going to be okay. Not immediately. Not completely. Not without ongoing work and frequent setbacks and moments of questioning everything. But okay. Eventually, incrementally, possibly, okay. Because 18 months ago, I'd made choice to survive. Had begged Alpha King not to leave me to die. Had volunteered for strategic suffering in exchange for revenge. And that choice, terrible as it was, costly as it proved, had led me here. To healing. To purpose. To life that was mine instead of just role I performed. I'd paid price I hadn't fully understood when I'd made the bargain. Had endured suffering that nearly destroyed me. Had questioned whether survival was worth what it cost. But standing here now, or sitting technically, in springs that symbolized healing, in territory that represented rebuilding, beside person who'd weaponized me and was learning to support me instead, I had my answer. Yes. Survival was worth it. Healing was possible. And life after strategic suffering could be more than just existing. It could be actually living. Complicated, imperfect, damaged living. But living nonetheless.
And that was enough.
More than enough. That was everything. From the execution platform to healing springs. From a strategic weapon to actual person. From don't leave me here to I choose to keep living. Naomi's journey is proof that trauma doesn't have to be a permanent identity, that healing is a choice you make every day, that surviving strategic suffering means something when it leads to systemic change. If this story hit you, if you believe in complicated forgiveness, if you know that healing isn't linear, if you understand that both damage and growth can be true simultaneously, drop a comment with your favorite moment.
Mine?
When Naomi realized she'd gone 3 days without constant trauma thoughts. That's when I knew she'd actually survive instead of just exist. Like, subscribe, share with someone who needs to know that the worst thing you volunteered for doesn't have to define your entire future. Until next time, you are not what was done to you or what you did to yourself in service of revenge. You are what you choose to become afterward. And sometimes, the bravest choice is just choosing to keep healing. Peace out, story lovers.